My name is Ellie, I'm 28 years old, and I have long hair that shines like the golden sun. It sways in the breeze as if by magic. I'm tall and slender, with just the right proportions, and I exude a unique charm in every movement. My blue eyes are like the deep ocean, hiding countless secrets and emotions. My husband and I had come to this beautiful island for our holiday, full of joy and anticipation, hoping to enjoy some peaceful and romantic time away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The island was picturesque, with a blue sky stretching to the horizon and a white sandy beach so fine and soft that it felt like walking on clouds. The coconut trees by the shore swayed in the wind, rustling and adding a natural rhythm to the peaceful atmosphere. We lived in a small villa by the sea. Every morning, the sun shone through the thin curtains and woke us up on our bed, starting a beautiful day. We would hold hands and stroll on the beach, picking up shells and watching the sunrise and sunset. Those days were simply sweet as honey. However, all this beauty came to an abrupt end on that terrifying night. It was a sultry night, without a single breath of wind, as if the air had frozen. My husband and I were enjoying dinner on the terrace of our villa when suddenly, from a distance, we heard a strange noise, like a painful scream or an angry growl. Then we saw a group of figures stumbling towards us. At first, we thought they were drunk tourists, but as they got closer, we realized with horror that they were not normal humans at all. Their skin was pale as paper, their eyes were vacant, and black liquid was constantly flowing from their mouths. They were zombies. Fear instantly overwhelmed us, and I clutched my husband's hand so hard that my fingernails dug into his flesh. The number of zombies was increasing, and they lunged at us with bared teeth and claws, making creepy sounds. We turned around and ran desperately towards the villa. In the panic, I tripped and fell, and my husband hurriedly turned back to pull me up. Just then, a zombie took the opportunity to pounce on him. My husband pushed me away forcefully and fought with the zombie. I struggled to get up and tried to help my husband, but more zombies came and surrounded us. We could only fight back and retreat, running towards the exit of the villa. In the chaos, my husband and I got separated. I shouted his name at the top of my lungs, but the only thing that answered me was the hissing sound of the zombies. I was fleeing alone in the dark, surrounded by a sickening, bloody smell. Every step I took felt like I was stepping on a landmine that could go off at any moment, and I didn't know when a zombie would pop up. Fear made my whole body tremble, my teeth kept chattering, and tears flowed uncontrollably down my face. I didn't know if I would ever see my husband again, or if I could survive on this island full of zombies. But I knew that I couldn't give up, that I had to find him, and that I had to survive. After getting separated from my husband during that nightmare night, I felt as if I were in an endless abyss of terror. There was complete silence all around, only the occasional hissing sound of the zombies breaking the suffocating silence. I huddled in the corner of an abandoned hut, covered in dirt and sweat, my long golden hair in disarray, my former elegance and beauty long gone. I don't know how long it took, but when the first faint rays of morning sunlight struggled through the heavy clouds and fell on this land shrouded in fear, I dared to cautiously peek out. I dragged my exhausted body slowly through the ruins, as if I were using all my strength with every step. Just when I felt desperate and could hardly hold on any longer, I suddenly heard a light sound of footsteps. My heart tightened, my muscles tensed, and my breathing became rapid and heavy. I quickly hid behind a huge rock, my eyes wide open, staring fixedly in the direction of the sound. In a moment, a figure appeared in my field of vision. It was a man with a strong, sculpted body and bronze skin that shimmered with a healthy glow in the sunlight. He walked with a steady, powerful gait, and his eyes revealed a kind of determination and calmness. He was wearing a worn camouflage uniform and gripping a long knife in his hand, vigilantly observing his surroundings. I hesitated, not knowing whether to reveal myself. Just then, he seemed to sense my presence and suddenly turned his head, locking eyes with my terrified gaze. I was so scared that I almost screamed and instinctively wanted to run away. But he didn't make any aggressive moves. Instead, he frowned slightly and said softly, "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." Hearing his low and gentle voice, my tense nerves eased slightly. I slowly walked out from behind the rock, and when he saw my disheveled appearance, a flash of sympathy crossed his eyes. "Are you alone?" he asked. I nodded and told him, with a trembling voice, about how I had lost track of my husband. After listening, he was silent for a moment and then said, "My name is Jack. This island is now full of zombies, and it's too dangerous for you to be alone. Come with me, and we can look out for each other." I hesitated for a moment, but looking at his sincere eyes, I finally nodded. From then on, Jack and I embarked on a journey of survival on this zombie island. Jack was always at the front, shielding me from any dangers that might arise. His attentiveness and thoughtfulness gradually made me let down my guard. In this terrifying environment, he was like a solid mountain, giving me a sense of security. And I, without knowing it, began to pay attention to his every move and developed a strange kind of dependence on him in my heart. The days of surviving on this island with the zombies with Jack seemed like an endless nightmare, but because of his presence, there was a little more warmth and comfort. We shuttled between the abandoned buildings, and every stop was full of vigilance. Jack always carefully checked the surroundings first to make sure there was no threat from the zombies before letting me rest in peace. His movements were skillful and neat, and his focused expression made me can't help but look at him a few more times. Once, we were searching for food in a dilapidated supermarket. A putrid smell filled the air, and the shelves had collapsed, leaving the goods scattered on the floor. Jack was walking ahead of me, his long knife clenched in his hand, his eyes scanning every corner warily. I followed behind him, my footsteps faltering with fear. Suddenly, a zombie pounced at me from behind a shelf, its teeth bared. I screamed in fear and instinctively closed my eyes. Just as I thought I was about to die at the zombie's mouth, I heard a muffled sound, followed by the zombie's shriek. I slowly opened my eyes and saw Jack stabbing the zombie's head with his long knife. I was filled with admiration at his determined gaze. After the zombie fell, Jack quickly came to my side and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" I looked at him and a warm feeling welled up in my heart. I nodded. His hand rested lightly on my shoulder, and at that moment, my heart beat involuntarily faster. As we spent more time together, our tacit understanding deepened. At night, we would hide in a relatively safe place to rest. Jack always let me have the most comfortable position while he guarded the perimeter, vigilantly watching for any movement. Lying there, I looked at his back and my dependence on him grew deeper and deeper. One night, the moonlight shone through the broken window and fell on us. I looked at Jack. His face was a little tired, but still so determined. I couldn't help but whisper, "Jack, thank you for always protecting me." He turned his head and looked at me, his eyes shining with tenderness. "You're welcome. We have to survive together." At that moment, our eyes met, and there was a special kind of atmosphere in the air. My cheeks flushed slightly, and a feeling welled up in my heart that I had never felt before. On this terrifying zombie island, our relationship seemed to be undergoing subtle changes. An ambiguous feeling was quietly growing between us, and I didn't seem to resist this change, and I even looked forward to it developing further. During the days of growing intimacy with Jack, I seemed to temporarily forget the pain of getting separated from my husband and immerse myself in the rare warmth and comfort in this terrifying environment. But fate is always full of uncertainty. An unexpected moment pulled me back to the cruel reality. It was a cloudy afternoon, with dark clouds rolling across the sky, as if heralding an impending storm. Jack and I were hiding from the zombies in an abandoned factory, surrounded by a pungent smell of engine oil and dust. We carefully searched the various workshops for supplies that might be useful, with Jack still walking ahead of me, closely following behind. Suddenly, a faint sound came from the distance, like someone whispering. Jack immediately stopped, gripping his long knife nervously, and I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. We slowly approached the direction of the sound, taking every step with extreme caution. When we turned around a huge machine, I saw a familiar figure. The figure was a bit disheveled, his clothes were tattered, and his face was covered in dust and sweat, but I recognized him at once. It was my husband. My heart rate suddenly accelerated, and a complex emotion welled up in my heart. Ellie, my husband, saw me too, and his eyes filled with surprise and excitement as he ran towards me. I subconsciously took a step forward, but just then I felt Jack next to me stiffen slightly. My husband tightly embraced me in his arms, saying over and over, "I've finally found you. I thought I'd never see you again." I felt my husband's familiar embrace, and my heart was filled with mixed emotions. Once, this embrace was my warmest harbor, but now, after experiencing all kinds of things with Jack, I'm a bit at a loss. I slowly broke free from my husband's embrace and introduced Jack to him. My husband looked at Jack, and a flash of caution and doubt crossed his eyes, while Jack politely nodded to him, but a trace of imperceptible tension also revealed in his eyes. An awkward atmosphere filled the air, and I stood between the two of them, not knowing what to say. I had thought that I would never see my husband again on this zombie island, but now his sudden appearance had made the budding intimacy between Jack and me instantly complicated. I looked at the two men in front of me, the husband I once loved deeply, and Jack, who had given me warmth and protection in times of crisis. My heart was full of conflict and confusion, and I didn't know how to move forward. Since my unexpected reunion with my husband, this already crisis-ridden zombie island has added an indescribable layer of suffering for me. At night, the three of us took temporary refuge in an abandoned warehouse. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the dilapidated windows as if the zombies were desperately trying to break through. I lay on a worn-out mattress in the corner, my eyes fixed on the ceiling as my thoughts tangled up like a ball of string. My husband was sleeping not far from me, and I could hear his steady breathing. In the past, this familiar sound could help me sleep, but now it made me feel extremely oppressed. Memories flooded back, and the good times we had spent together, those sweet moments, came to mind one after the other. I remembered the laughter we had when we strolled along the beach, and the deep looks we exchanged during candlelit dinners. These memories made me feel even more guilty towards my husband. Jack, on the other hand, was sitting quietly at the entrance to the warehouse, keeping watch. The dim light fell on him, outlining his strong silhouette. As I looked at him, another emotion welled up in my heart. During the time we had spent together, he had given me care and protection, making me feel warm in this desperate situation. His bravery and attentiveness had made me deeply dependent on him. I couldn't help but ask myself, what exactly were my feelings for Jack? Was it the dependence born in these extreme circumstances, or was it true love? And had my feelings for my husband changed because of this separation and reunion? I struggled within, each thought like a sharp blade, cutting deep wounds in my heart. I was afraid of hurting my husband, who had risked his life to find me despite the threat of the zombies. How could I so easily betray this deep love? But I couldn't ignore my feelings for Jack either. He was like a ray of sunshine in the darkness, giving me the courage to continue living. When the first ray of sunshine shone into the warehouse in the morning, I still hadn't come up with an answer. I looked at the two men in front of me, both of whom had deep feelings for me, and my choice would change the fate of the three of us. On this island ravaged by zombies, I not only had to face the challenge of survival, but also make a choice in this complex emotional entanglement. It was really too difficult for me. In the midst of this agonizing internal struggle, the days continued to pass on this island infested with zombies. I tried to maintain a semblance of calm and find a delicate balance between my husband and Jack, but fate did not intend to give me more time to think. That day, we were walking through an abandoned neighborhood, the silence around us eerily loud. The dilapidated buildings swayed in the wind, their broken windows making a whining sound that sounded like the wailing of the dead. Jack was in the lead, his long knife flashing in the light as he scanned the area for any sign of danger. My husband was next to me, holding my hand tightly as if to give me a sense of security. However, danger struck without warning. A group of zombies swarmed out of the ruins on both sides of the street, snarling and staggering towards us. Jack reacted quickly, shouting, "Protect Ellie," and without hesitation, he charged into the group of zombies. His movements were swift and powerful, his long knife swinging through the air, each strike landing precisely at the zombies' vitals. My husband was not far behind, drawing his dagger from his waist and engaging the zombies in a fierce battle. I was trembling with fear at the sudden scene, hiding on the sidelines and keeping my eyes fixed on them. Watching Jack fight his way through the zombie horde, his heroic figure instantly transformed my worries and fears into endless concern. Just then, a zombie took advantage of Jack's inattentiveness and crept up from behind. I screamed in horror, "Jack, look out!" Jack heard my voice and tried to turn around to avoid it, but it was already too late. The zombie pounced on him and knocked him to the ground. I rushed over to help Jack, regardless of the danger. My husband saw what I was doing and shouted, "Ellie, don't go. It's dangerous." But I couldn't care less. I pushed the zombie away from Jack with all my strength, and Jack took the opportunity to get up and quickly finish off the zombie. However, Jack was injured from the impact and blood was slowly flowing from his arm. I looked at Jack with a heart full of sorrow, and tears welled up in my eyes. I could no longer suppress my emotions and threw myself into his arms. Jack held me tightly, and at that moment, I felt as if I had found a place for my soul to rest. My husband happened to see the scene, and his eyes were filled with anger and sadness. The dagger in his hand hung down helplessly. "Ellie, what are you doing?" My husband's voice trembled with a hint of desperation. I broke free from Jack's embrace and looked at my husband, my heart full of guilt, but I didn't know how to explain it. The hissing sound of the zombies echoed in my ears, and the emotions between the three of us completely exploded at this moment, falling into an irreparable stalemate. The hissing of the zombies echoed in my ears, but at that moment the chaos in my heart was far more unbearable than the noisy sounds. My husband's angry and sad eyes were like a sharp blade, piercing my heart. The blood that kept oozing from Jack's arm made me feel even more distressed. "Ellie, you have to give me an explanation." My husband's voice echoed through the deserted neighborhood with an unquestionable determination. He took a step forward, his eyes locked on me, as if he wanted to find out what I was really thinking from the depths of my heart. I opened my mouth to say something, but my throat felt as if it was blocked by something, and I couldn't get a word out. I could feel Jack's gaze fall on me too, a gaze that held a hint of expectation and a trace of tension. Let's get out of here. It's too dangerous," I finally managed to say, trying to break this suffocating stalemate. But my husband was unmoved, and he continued to stare at me with disappointment in his eyes. "Is this how you avoid problems?" "Ellie, I risked my life looking for you in the zombie horde, and you..." My husband's voice grew lower and lower, almost to the point of mumbling. I looked at his haggard face, and a flood of guilt washed over me. Once, he was my strongest support, but now I have broken his heart. I don't know what's wrong with me," I finally said, my voice shaking. "On this horrible island, it's Jack who's always by my side, protecting me, and I didn't continue, because I knew how cruel these words were to my husband." Jack was quietly listening on the side, without saying a word, just silently bandaging his own wounds. A complex emotion flashed in his eyes, a deep affection for me and guilt towards my husband. "So what do you really think? Are you going to continue with me, or..." My husband's voice came again, this time with a hint of fatigue in his tone. I stood still, my heart struggling within me. On the one hand was my husband, who had once been so close to me, and with whom I had so many fond memories. On the other was Jack, who had given me warmth and strength in times of crisis, and who had made me feel alive again. Time passed by minute, and the threat of the zombies grew closer and closer. But I felt as if I were in a dark abyss, unable to find an exit. I knew that I had to make a decision that would not only change my own fate, but also the fate of the two of them. I finally mustered the courage to speak my decision, but just then, another group of zombies charged towards us. Helpless, we could only temporarily put all this aside and once again throw ourselves into the fight against the zombies. But this difficult choice is like a heavy mountain, weighing me down, and I know that after the battle is over, I will have to face it after all. The battle with the zombies raged fiercely, and we, who were already mentally and physically exhausted, were now even more in a desperate situation. The zombies kept coming like a tide, and their twisted faces and putrid bodies made the air sickening. Jack endured the pain in his arm as he swung his long knife, each attack with decisive power. His eyes were fixed, staring at the zombies in front of him, not missing a single flaw. My husband was not to be outdone, gripping his dagger tightly as he fought his way through the zombie horde. His movements were not as swift as Jack's, but each blow was precise and deadly. I was trembling slightly as I clutched a metal rod I had picked up from the ground. Fear was ever present, but seeing them fighting so fiercely to protect me gave me courage. I gritted my teeth and mustered the courage to charge at a zombie that was trying to sneak up on Jack. The rod hit the zombie's head with a dull sound. The battle lasted a long time, and we gradually became a little overwhelmed. The number of zombies seemed endless, surging towards us in waves. Jack's arm had become sluggish due to the wound, and blood kept dripping onto the ground, staining the ground beneath his feet red. My husband's strength was also rapidly depleting, his face covered in sweat and blood, his breathing becoming rapid and heavy. Just as we felt despair, we suddenly heard a strange sound. The sound was low and eerie, as if it came from deep underground. We subconsciously stopped what we were doing and looked around warily. Then the ground began to vibrate slightly, and pieces of gravel fell from the building. "What's going on?" I asked in horror, my voice trembling with fear. "I don't know. Let's find a safe place to hide," Jack shouted, his voice tinged with anxiety. We started running towards a nearby building, and the zombies were hot on our heels. As soon as we entered the building, we didn't have time to catch our breath before a group of huge mutated zombies appeared in front of us. These zombies were taller and stronger than ordinary zombies, their bodies covered in black scales, and their eyes flashing a strange red light. What are these things?" My husband's voice was full of shock and fear. "It seems we're in big trouble," Jack said with a frown, a hint of worry in his eyes. The mutant zombies let out low growls and slowly closed in on us. We stood with our backs against each other, our weapons in hand, and ready for the new challenge. On this zombie island full of dangers, new crises made our situation even more difficult, and the difficult choice in my heart was temporarily put aside, because at the moment, we must first survive. The huge mutant zombies slowly closed in, each step causing the ground to tremble slightly. The putrid stench they gave off was several times stronger than that of ordinary zombies, and it was nauseating. The three of us stood back to back, holding our weapons tightly, our hearts pounding violently in our chests, as if they were about to burst out the next second. Jack took the lead. He gritted his teeth against the intense pain in his arm and shouted, swinging his knife at the closest mutant zombie. The mutant zombie reacted extremely quickly, slightly sidestepping, easily avoiding Jack's attack, and then swinging its thick arm, slapping Jack hard. Jack hurriedly dodged backwards, but tripped over the broken pieces of gravel on the ground and almost fell. Seeing this, my husband didn't hesitate to rush forward and stab the mutant zombie in the abdomen with his dagger. The mutant zombie let out a deafening roar in pain and slapped my husband back with a backhand, sending him flying. "No!" I screamed in horror, my eyes full of worry. Without thinking about my own safety, I rushed over with the iron rod and slammed it into the mutant zombie's head. The mutant zombie was a little dazed by my blow, and I took advantage of this opportunity to quickly run over to my husband and help him up. A little blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth, and his face was as pale as paper, but he still said with great effort, "I'm fine, just leave me alone and be careful." At this time, several other mutated zombies also surrounded us, trapping us in the middle. Our situation was extremely dangerous, and our weapons seemed powerless in the face of these powerful mutated zombies. Jack clutched his long knife tightly, his eyes revealing a hint of determination. He looked at my husband and I and shouted, "We can't just sit here and wait to die. Fight!" Just as we were preparing to attack again, suddenly there was a loud explosion from the side of the building. The huge blast knocked us to the ground, and the smoke and dust filled the air, blinding us. When the smoke and dust cleared a little, we were surprised to find that the mutant zombies seemed to have been attracted by the sudden explosion and were walking towards the direction of the sound. "What's going on?" I was full of confusion, and I felt a little relieved and full of anxiety at the same time. No matter what, this is our chance. Let's go. Jack made a quick decision, helped his husband up, and the three of us ran desperately in the opposite direction. During the escape, we came to an unfamiliar area. It was eerily quiet, with no hissing from the zombies, only the occasional sound of the wind. We took temporary refuge in an abandoned house and checked each other's injuries. I looked at the two people in front of me, and my heart was full of mixed emotions. This series of accidents has caused our fortunes to take a dramatic turn, and I have absolutely no idea where the future lies. In this silent environment, my thoughts gradually became clearer. I know that we can't keep running away like this, and that we have to face not only the threat of the zombies, but also the difficult decision I have to make between my husband and Jack. But for now, I can only pray that we can find a way to survive on this zombie island full of dangers. Time seemed to have come to a standstill in that abandoned house. The occasional sound of the wind outside the house seemed to be fate whispering in my ear, urging me to make that difficult decision. My husband leaned weakly against the corner of the wall, his pale face showing a hint of exhaustion and anticipation. Jack sat nearby, his eyes full of both deep affection for me and trepidation about the unknown. I paced back and forth in the house as the scales in my heart kept tipping and swaying. Memories flooded back of my time with my husband, of those sweet moments, those warm moments, all of them coming back to me. We had spent countless beautiful days together, and his gentleness and thoughtfulness, his care and protection were an inseparable part of my life. However, the experiences I had with Jack on this terrifying zombie island were also unforgettable. The protection he gave me in times of danger, his determined gaze and warm embrace, gave me a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. Ellie, I know this is difficult for you. My husband's voice broke the silence, weak but firm. But I hope you can follow your heart. No matter what your choice is, I hope you can be happy. I looked at my husband, and a pang of pain shot through my heart. His generosity made me feel even more guilty, but I knew that I couldn't force a relationship. Jack also stood up and slowly walked over to me, whispering, Ellie, I don't want to pressure you. But I want to say that no matter what decision you make, I will respect you. On this island, you are my motivation to live. I just hope you will be safe. Their words made me even more conflicted. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to calm myself down. I remembered when the zombies were besieging us, Jack did not hesitate to stand in front of me, his determined back. I also remembered after we got separated, my husband searched for me recklessly, that persistent love. Finally, I opened my eyes, and there was a sense of determination in my gaze. I walked over to Jack, gently took his hand, and said, Jack, on this crazy zombie island, you are the one who has given me courage and hope, and made me feel the meaning of being alive. I choose to go on with you. A flash of surprise crossed Jack's eyes, and he shook my hand firmly, nodding forcefully. My husband, although a flash of loss crossed his eyes, still managed to force a smile and said, I wish you well, Ellie. I hope you can all get out of here safely. Just then, we suddenly heard a loud noise outside the house, which sounded like the howling of the zombies. We immediately became alert and grabbed our weapons. I knew that making a choice meant facing new challenges. The three of us once again stood side by side, ready to face the unknown danger. On this zombie island, our fates were once again intertwined, and I believed that as long as we worked together, we would definitely find hope for survival and move towards a new future.